We want Iran's leadership to have no ability to threaten the United States or its allies, Israel or the Arab world. We want Iran's leadership really ultimately to collapse. We want the Iranian people to rise up. We have breaking news out of the Middle East, out of the epicenter. President Trump has decided to cancel, to scrap the memorandum of understanding, the ceasefire with Iran, because Iran is not complying. What does this mean? How should Christians pray? President Trump has already ordered U.S. forces to attack more than 80 military sites in Iran. This is the biggest escalation since the war went into a ceasefire. We're going to take a look at it in this breaking news edition of Inside the Epicenter. Hi, this is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem, and I want to just kind of walk you through what is happening and my analysis and how Christians should pray. We just published an article, a column that I did, a news analysis on All Israel News late on Wednesday afternoon. The headline was, Evangelicals should be glad President Trump is getting much tougher with Iran. His deal was way too generous, and Tehran could never be trusted. And now we must pray without ceasing. Again, this is Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem with this special edition, the special report, breaking news edition of Inside the Epicenter. This is, of course, the podcast that's the flagship educational initiative of the Joshua Fund, a ministry to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. This is a ministry that over the last 20 years, we are just at our 20-year anniversary, and we're going to be talking about that in the coming weeks. But by God's mercies, we have raised and invested more than $130 million in strengthening the church in Israel, among the Palestinians, and in 5 neighboring Arab countries, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. And now in the last few months, we've been investing in the church and gospel ministry in Iran as well. And because we, Lynn and I, who founded the Joshua Fund, and our board and our staff, believe that God loves very much, very deeply, Israel and her Arab neighbors, as well as the people of Iran. And yet this, as we've seen, this corridor between Tel Aviv and Tehran has been the most volatile, the most challenging, and the most dangerous in recent years. So where we are is, it was only a month ago or so that President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance negotiated and signed a 14-point memorandum of understanding that would establish a ceasefire between the United States and what's left of the leadership of Iran. The idea was not that this was a final deal. It wasn't a peace deal, but it was the framework, basically the offer that President Trump was making to the Iranian leadership, saying, look, here's the benefits you get if you negotiate in good faith a solid, serious, verifiable deal, a deal that will end this war, a deal that will absolutely prevent Iran from ever building nuclear weapons and threatening the United States and Israel and the Arabs and all of the United States allies in the region. So the MOU was the framework, 14 points. And as you've heard me and Lynn talk about on this program, we have felt on this podcast that the deal was way too generous. Now, again, it wasn't a final deal, and we've acknowledged that. It was basically Trump front-loading the carrots so he wouldn't have to use the sticks. In other words, it offered the Iranian regime, such that it is, it offered numerous incentives, economic, financial incentives, plus the incentive of the United States withdrawing military force from the region and saying, okay, if everything is signed, sealed, and delivered and adhered to, then this can be the end of the conflict. Now, we thought it was too generous because, for example, it offered Iran a $300 billion plus reconstruction, rehabilitation fund that would be funded by our oil-rich Arab Gulf neighbors. Not by American taxpayers, certainly not by Israel. The deal also, or the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, offered Iran to remove economic sanctions that the United States and the international community had imposed on Iran because of the growing threat that Iran posed, not just because of nuclear, but missiles and terrorism and so forth. Of course, the deal would offer Iran that the United States would end the naval blockade, the embargo on Iran from being able to import or export through the Strait of Hormuz. And so altogether, this would bring in hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars back into the Iranian economy, back into the Iranian government coffers. This was supposed to be an inducement, right? Trump was putting the carrots, the inducements, the benefits to Iran up front. And therefore, the MOU did not mention things like Iran could never enrich uranium, that Iran would have to ship out all of its enriched uranium to the United States or some agreed upon ally, that Iran could not continue building ballistic missiles and of a certain range, that could reach American, Arab, and Israeli targets, that Iran would not keep funding terrorist groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, or other things. So all those types of things that we want as Americans and as Israelis and those in the Gulf want, none of those things were actually specified, except that Iran could never have a nuclear weapon, which is sort of obvious, and that was the whole point of the war. But that's what we worried about. This is way too generous because you're offering all the good stuff, all the benefits to Iran right up front, but you're not, Mr. President, you're not saying exactly what they have to do. But the president maintained this was to test the Iranians and to say, look, now you know what the benefits to you are. Now let's sit down, and over the next 60 days, we can negotiate the full deal. And he was pretty clear about what his intentions were. But what has Iran done? Iran didn't keep this deal from the first day. Iran has been firing at ships trying to pass peacefully through the Strait of Hormuz. And Iran has also been attacking with missiles and suicide drones a number of its neighbors in the Arab Gulf region. And the United States, to President Trump's credit, has been shooting back when those attacks have occurred, but those attacks have escalated. And in the last 24 hours, as I record this, President Trump had ordered the U.S. military to attack 80 Iranian military sites. That's the biggest round of fighting since the MOU was signed and the ceasefire was supposed to go into place. And I think that evangelicals need to see this as a good thing. Not good, obviously, in that Iran was breaking the ceasefire. Of course not. But it is good that President Trump is getting much tougher with Iran. If those incentives had worked and Iran had really negotiated and signed a very serious deal that we all thought, okay, well, that truly gets rid of the problem as long as it's verified and so forth, maybe we could have lived with that. But that's not what's happening. What we thought would happen is happening, and that is that Iran hasn't even lived up to its end of the bargain already, certainly not negotiating in good faith. I want to share with you two sound bites of President Trump. He's in Ankara, the capital of Turkey, and he's part of the NATO summit. The annual summit and it happens to be being held in Turkey. Now, Turkey is a big problem for other reasons. Turkish President Recep Erdogan, is a member of NATO, but he's not acting like a real ally. And we'll deal with that on a separate podcast. But, Erdogan has been under U.S. economic sanctions because why? Because he was buying the most advanced missile systems from Russia, from Vladimir Putin. And you're not supposed to be doing that as a NATO ally, obviously, but he did it. And it was called the S-400, actually missile defense system. But still, you're not supposed to buy Russian military equipment if you're a NATO member. President Erdogan of Turkey, has also been threatening to invade Israel. Turkey has been threatening to attack Israel, and Turkey has been accusing Israel of being a genocidal nation, of committing genocide in Gaza, which is totally not true, and calling Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a Nazi. So for all these reasons, there's a really troubled relationship between the United States and Turkey, and President Trump is trying to, cool that down. That's something we'll talk about later, but I want to play the first of two sound bites now. You're going to hear President Trump say what is wrong with Iranian behavior right now, and you're going to hear how angry he is. Let's take a listen.
Mr. President, is the ceasefire over? Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over. I'll speak to our negotiators. They want to negotiate. They're good people. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner. But they have to come back to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's just a waste of time dealing with them. They're liars. We make a deal. And if I make a deal with him, we have a deal. And he goes out, he talks. We make a deal. Everyone's agreed. No nuclear weapon. We make a deal. They go outside, talk to the press. They say, we never even talked about it. There's something wrong with them. They're cuckoo. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
Okay, so you just heard President Trump say that the deal is off. He'll talk to his own negotiator, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. He's, in theory, he's not saying that there'll never be negotiations with Iran, right? Again, but President Trump is saying clearly to reporters openly that Iran has broken this deal, and I don't want to use all the language that he has used, but he's certainly calling the Iranian leadership sick and vicious and violent and evil. He's calling them liars, and all of that is true. So this is Trump having tried to be generous, tried to be magnanimous, and basically the Iranian leadership has bit his hand. And Trump is furious. Now let's listen to the second soundbite in which Trump talks more about his thinking about all that's transpired and how he has had to order U.S. forces to attack Iran in a bigger way than any time since the ceasefire began. Let's take a listen.
We attacked very powerfully last night. The very dangerous people from Iran, they're sick. There's something wrong with them. We said, go and do your funeral stuff. And instead of that, they start shooting rockets at ships yesterday. And so we hit them very hard last night, very hard. I would say 20-1, 20 times tougher. And I told them, every time you hit, we hit. And of course, they're dirty players, so they go after everyone, probably including me. I've been number one on their list for years. And they're a bunch of scum, you want to know the truth. They're scum. And so we don't like them. I don't like them. And they're evil people, and it's the denuclearization of Iran. And we're going to denuke it. We're not going to let them because they're crazy, and they can't have a nuclear weapon. And they go around killing people. They've killed thousands and thousands of our soldiers. They've killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. They had the roadside bomb, Soleimani. I took care of him, first term. And that was a big thing, because I think they probably would be a lot stronger had he been around, because he was a bad guy, but he was an evil genius, but a bad guy. And he was the father of the roadside bomb. The roadside bomb is a bomb that goes on when you're driving your little vehicle around, and it goes on and you have no legs, no arms, and no face. And they've killed thousands and thousands of people. Even the SS Cole was theirs, if you remember that disaster. So I don't like them at all. And frankly, I think we waste a lot of time with them. I think we should just do our business. Can you imagine? They start shooting bombs, actually missiles at ships yesterday. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, a couple of others, and they don't. I don't think they know what the hell they're doing. But they're bad people, very bad people. I think they're incompetent, by the way. Because if they were competent, they would have made a deal a long time ago, like, how about 47 years ago? So they've been in trouble for 47 years, and we took out their first set of leaders, we took out their second set of leaders. They want to take out the U.S. leader, me. I'm on every list. I saw things this morning, I'm on every single one of their lists. And so far, I guess I've been a little bit lucky, but that maybe doesn't last very long, because that's the way it goes. But we have great people. But these are evil, sick people, and we have to rid their cancer. Their cancer. And you know what you do? You got to cut out cancer early. Man, that's the way I feel.
Okay, hold that thought. We're going to come back with more analysis, but we do need to take a break for our sponsors. Thank you so much for listening. Don't go away. We'll be right back for more of this special report on Inside the Epicenter.
You're listening to Inside the Epicenter with Joel and Lynn Rosenberg. If today's program is encouraging you, there's much more waiting for you in our podcast feed. More than 350 episodes of Inside the Epicenter available on your favorite podcast app. We cover topics like Israel, Bible prophecy, theology, the Arab world, how to pray wisely in turbulent times, and so much more. To learn more about the podcast and the Joshua Fund and how Joel and Lynn are strengthening believers, providing practical help across the region, and more, visit joshuafund.com/radio. That's joshuafund.com/radio.
All right, so that gives you a sense of where we are right now. And my expectation is that things could escalate significantly. Now, I can't tell you what that means. Does that mean, for example, that Iran's going to start firing whatever ballistic missiles it has at Israel? Is Iran going to start firing ballistic missiles at U.S. forces in the region, at our Arab allies in the region, in massive numbers? Now, President Trump has said that Iran's missile inventory has been destroyed by about 85%, and many of the missile launchers have been destroyed as well. So this is a question. Let's say Iran has about 15% of the missile inventory that it had before February 28th. So does that mean that Iran has the ability to start firing those missiles now? And if so, does the United States and our Arab allies and Israel have enough missile interceptors to shoot them down? Or could this thing really get ugly and quickly? That's a question. There's another question. Will Israel be allowed by President Trump to enter the fight against Iran again? At the moment, I think my initial expectations would be the United States would do this by itself and tell Israel, stand down, don't get involved, so that Iran doesn't attack you. But what if Iran does attack? Then I would expect President Trump to give Israel the freedom of operations to join the United States in punishing and destroying more of the Iran military and perhaps even Iranian leaders. So these are some of the big questions. Now, I think the key thing here for Christians is I see these as good developments. Again, not obviously that Iran is breaking this deal and we're going back into fighting. I don't want that. You don't want that. But Iran's leaders cannot be allowed to get away with breaking a ceasefire. They can't be allowed to attack oil tankers and other ships trying to move peacefully through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran cannot be allowed to control the Strait of Hormuz or terrify or intimidate anyone, the United States, Israel, our Arab allies or, tankers and ships from all over the world. It absolutely must not be allowed to happen. Not after all that President Trump has done to destroy so much of the Iranian regime and Iran's offensive military capabilities with Israel right at his side. So what I'm saying is I think because Iran's leaders are acting as wickedly as I had anticipated and that Lynn had anticipated, that they're not trustworthy and that they have been trying to break this deal every day, day after day, week after week, since the ceasefire was announced, that President Trump had to do this, that if he didn't do it, it would be a sign of real weakness. So I think the president is doing the right thing, but we need to pray because what's not clear is, so how does this war end? How does Operation Epic Fury, or whatever it's going to be named now, how does it actually come to an end where we get what President Trump promised, which is that Iran's leadership give an unconditional surrender? That's what we want. We want Iran's leadership to have no ability to threaten the United States or its allies, Israel or the Arab world. We want Iran's leadership really ultimately to collapse. We want the Iranian people to rise up. So we need to be praying for these things. And what we need is for President Trump, we need to be praying for President Trump to have the wisdom from above, as we read in the book of James in the New Testament. We need to pray that the president has wisdom from above to know how to bring this war to an end, how to bring Iran's leadership into submission, how to end the threat from Iran once and for all. In the Bible, the Apostle Paul commands us to pray for our leaders. Why? So that we may lead a quiet and tranquil life. That's from 1 Timothy chapter 2. We all know those verses, and evangelicals need to be praying without ceasing for President Trump. Look, you may not even agree with President Trump. You may not have voted for him, or you may have voted for him and not appreciate what the steps he's taken economically or foreign policy or in terms of this war with Iran. But look, none of us want a war raging in the Gulf, right? We don't want a war raging in the Gulf to continue with no end in sight. None of us want oil prices to skyrocket again and stay high forever or for a long time. We don't want to see gas prices going back up. We were just watching oil prices come down when the ceasefire began, seeing gas prices come down in the United States because of the ceasefire. Oil prices worldwide have been coming down. Nobody wants to see American soldiers and civilians who live in the Gulf region to endure another massive missile war. None of us want to see the 700,000 Americans who live here in Israel, where I live. Some of us are dual citizens. Some are Americans working at the embassy, working for businesses, working for the military, working for NGOs, for ministries. There's 700,000 Americans who live in Israel, and we don't want to see these Americans endure another Iranian massive missile war. And of course, we don't want to see any Israeli or our Arab allies and civilians or soldiers facing Iranian attacks. But we can't let the wicked Iranian regime win. We can't let them look like they're winning. We can't allow them to act like they're winning or feel like they're winning. President Trump was exceedingly generous in his MOU with Iran, far too generous in our view. He hoped Iranian leaders would welcome all the carrots. He hoped that he wouldn't need to use any more sticks. But President Trump was wrong. Now, to his credit, he's quickly realized that he was wrong. And he's reassessed, and he's not waiting until after the midterm elections in the United States to get much, much tougher with Tehran. And I say good for him. But it's not clear to me or to Lynn at this moment what exactly are the moves that he should take and how the United States government and military brings this Iranian threat to an end once and for all. So please keep praying. Pray without ceasing. And we will keep you posted. I'm doing this as an emergency update as things escalate here in the region. We promised you from the beginning of this podcast that we would take you inside the epicenter, The epicenter is the part of the world that the Bible describes as Israel and its neighborhood, right? This is the center of the world as God sees it. And we see many verses about that. We'll talk about that. We've talked about it in the past. We can talk about it more in the future. But we are taking you inside the epicenter, and this is the biggest development happening inside the epicenter right now. I hope this has been helpful. Please keep praying for us here in Israel as we're on the front lines. One of our sons, our youngest, is a soldier in the IDF. He is a combat soldier. So all of this is very real and personal to us. And of course, the Joshua Fund has staff here on the ground doing humanitarian relief and other type of work to strengthen the church and to care for the poor and needy here in Israel. So we appreciate your prayers, and we also appreciate your financial support. This is a critical moment. And if you'd like to become an Epicenter ally and provide a gift of $50 or more every month, you can go to joshuafund.com. Again, joshuafund.com and get involved. Or if you want to make an emergency one-time gift so we can, because the needs are large no matter what. And if war is about to erupt all over again, the needs will be greater. Thank you. Thank you for standing with us. Thank you for your interest in what's going on inside the epicenter. And from Jerusalem, I hope this special report has been helpful for all of my colleagues, certainly for Lynn and the board and our staff and the production team, the producers who make this podcast happen. Thank you. God bless you. And please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and the victory that we need over this wicked Iranian regime and the liberation of the Iranian people. God bless you. I'm Joel Rosenberg. On your left, you'll find some videos we've chosen specifically for you. We look forward to partnering with you to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus.